The morning fog hung over Charleston like a woolen shawl, softening the edges of the city's antebellum architecture and muffling the clang of distant church bells. The cobblestone streets glistened from an earlier drizzle, and the scent of magnolia mixed with salt from the harbor created that uniquely southern perfume that lingered in the air like memory. Alana Brooks, 29 years old, exhaled deeply as she balanced two large insulated delivery bags against her hip and climbed the steps of a pastel blue townhouse on Bay Street. Her dark brown skin glowed beneath the early light, beads of moisture dotting her temples from the humidity. Her curls were tucked under a worn ball cap that matched her faded navy polo shirt, the uniform of her modest catering and delivery service, Brooks Table. The wooden porch creaked under her sneakers as she reached the door. She rang the bell and waited, wiping her hands on her jeans and adjusting the bags. Mrs. Blakely, an older woman with perfectly coiffed gray hair and a kind smile, opened the door with the warmth only genuine Southern hospitality could deliver. She said, "Right on time, sweetheart," beaming as she took the bag. "You're an angel, Alana. You know that?" Alana smiled, her voice tinged with the melodic softness of Charleston's low-country dialect. "My grandma always says food made with love hits differently." Mrs. Blakely handed her a $20 bill and patted her arm. "Tell your Miss Della I said hello, and don't let your old car quit on you in this weather." Alana offered a grateful nod. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." She turned and returned down the steps, her heart already shifting into gear for the next delivery. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her back pocket and glanced at the new address. 847 Ocean View Drive. Her breath caught. Ocean View Drive was a far cry from the creaky porches and cracked sidewalks of her grandmother's neighborhood. She'd only delivered there twice before, each time marveling at the manicured lawns, wraparound porches, and expensive wind chimes that sang in the breeze. And then there was number 847, the beach house with the white shutters and charcoal shingles. A place that had taken up residence in her memory years ago, long before she'd ever seen it. Because that house belonged to Ethan Whitmore. Or at least, it had. They hadn't spoken in over a decade, not since the senior year of high school. Back then, he was the golden boy, class valedictorian, track star, and the only person who'd ever looked at her like she mattered when her world had been falling apart. He was white, privileged, and destined for Yale. She was black, quiet, and carrying the weight of abandonment after her father left and her mother passed too soon. She had loved him. From afar, of course. Secretly, fiercely. She remembered how he smiled when he understood a complex math problem, tucked his hair behind his ears when he was nervous, and sat beside her in silence one rainy afternoon when she couldn't stop crying behind the gym. He never asked why. He just stayed. But he never knew. Not really. She never told him about the poems she'd written, the letters she'd kept in a box beneath her bed, the way she'd drawn his name in the condensation of car windows on cold mornings. Now, she was standing in front of what might still be his house. The house was even more beautiful up close, perched on a slight rise overlooking the Atlantic. The porch swing creaked gently in the breeze. Her reflection in the front door's glass looked like a ghost, from a past she had no business resurrecting. She rang the bell. A melodic chime echoed inside. She adjusted the strap of her bag, ran her hand over her cap, and took a steadying breath. Footsteps approached. Then the door opened, and time stopped. Ethan Whitmore, 31, stood in the doorway, taller than she remembered, his dark blonde hair shorter now, swept to the side with a grown man's precision. His pale skin caught the early sun, and his green eyes, those same soulful eyes, locked onto hers with a flicker of something she couldn't name. Recognition. Surprise. Maybe even something deeper. "Alana?" he said, his voice deeper than she remembered, roughened by years they hadn't shared. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She finally nodded. "Alana Brooks," he said again, more softly. "Wow." Before she could speak, another figure appeared behind him. A woman. She was tall, with sleek honey-blonde hair and flawless porcelain skin. Her sundress was the kind you only saw in boutiques where nothing had a price tag. A diamond the size of a grape sparkled on her finger. "Oh, the food," the woman said brightly, stepping forward. "You're with the catering company. The samples for the wedding?" "Yes," Alana managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "For Mr. Whitmore." The woman reached for the bags, her manicured fingers brushing Alana's calloused ones. "I'm Harper Langston," she said with a bright, polished smile. "Ethan's fiancé." "And you are?" "Just the delivery girl," Alana said quickly, too quickly, but Ethan was still looking at her. He said we went to school together, not taking his eyes off her. We were friends. That word stung more than she expected. Yes, they had been friends, but only one of them had been in love. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but the sound echoed in Alana's chest like a slammed gate. She didn't remember walking back to her car, only the cold stiffness of her fingers as they wrapped around the steering wheel and the hollow weight settling behind her ribs. She started the engine of her dented Honda Civic and pulled away from the curb slowly, careful not to look back, though she felt the burn of Ethan's gaze still lingering on her skin. He'd remembered her. That should have meant something. But how he'd said the word friends, like it was a placeholder for something small and safe, felt like a betrayal. Even though he owed her nothing, even though she'd been the one hiding all along. The ocean came into view as she drove south toward the antique shop. The horizon looked washed out by the morning light, pale and endless and too still. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. When she finally pulled into the alley behind the building, she sat in the car for several moments, letting the engine tick and cool beneath her. Above her, the window to her small apartment sat open. A sheer curtain fluttered lazily in the breeze, like it had no idea how much her world had tilted sideways. She climbed the narrow back stairs and let herself in quietly, as if someone inside might scold her for being shaken over a boy she hadn't seen in over a decade. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and antique wood, a scent she'd grown used to from living above the shop. The hardwood floors creaked underfoot. Mismatched bookshelves leaned against each wall, their contents crammed with inherited recipes, cookbooks, poetry, and dog-eared classics she could never quite give up. She tossed her keys onto the kitchen counter and kicked off her shoes, her limbs heavy with something she couldn't name. Grief? Longing? Regret? Her grandmother's old writing desk stood in the far corner of the room. She hadn't touched it in weeks, but now it pulled at her like a tide. She opened the drawer and pulled out the stack of unsent letters. Dozens of them, written in the neat cursive she'd inherited from Miss Della, each folded carefully and tied with a pale blue ribbon. Her heart squeezed as she unknotted the ribbon and lifted the first one from the stack. Dear Ethan, today in English class, you quoted Pablo Neruda, and I almost forgot to breathe. You said love was so short, forgetting is so long, and I wanted to tell you I understood. I'd been trying to ignore the sound of your laugh since the day you sat beside me behind the gym and said nothing while my heart broke. She set the letter down gently and reached for another. Dear Ethan, you smiled at me today in the hallway like we were friends, like it was easy. You have no idea how hard I work to keep that smile from undoing me. Alana swallowed against the lump rising in her throat. She had written those words when she was 17. Her mother had died that spring. Her father had long gone. Ethan had been the only person who saw her without flinching, without pity. But he'd never seen the way her heart burned for him. Not really. Not until today, if at all. She set the letters aside and leaned back in the chair, pressing the heels of her hands to her eyes. A few tears slid down her cheeks anyway. She didn't cry often anymore. Not since taking over caregiving for Miss Della. Not since building Brooks' table out of a crock pot and an old website template. But now, the ache was too much to hold inside. She wasn't that girl anymore. She couldn't be. But seeing him, hearing his voice, had pulled that girl right back to the surface. Her phone buzzed. She wiped her face and reached for it, expecting a new delivery request. Instead, it was a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Hey, it's Ethan. I got your number from the delivery service. I hope that's okay. Can we talk? In person, please." Alana's breath hitched. Her thumb hovered over the screen. For a wild moment, she thought of replying with one word. Why? But instead, she turned the phone off and dropped it onto the couch cushion beside her. Metam. Later that night, the shop downstairs had gone quiet, and the glow from the garden lamps outside cast gold shadows across the floor. Miss Della sat in her usual place by the window, wrapped in a quilt older than Alana's memory. Her wheelchair faced the herb boxes she'd planted, now overtaken by mint and sage. "You're burning the cornbread again," Della said without looking up. Alana startled and glanced at the oven. Smoke curled from the edges of the baking dish. She grabbed a pot holder and yanked it out, coughing. "I was distracted," she muttered, scraping the blackened top into the trash. "Distracted by a man, I'd wager." Alana froze. "What makes you say that?" Della turned her chair and fixed her with a knowing look. "You've been writing that boy's name in foggy windows since you were a teenager. He might show up again one day." Alana flushed. "It's not like that." "No? Then why are your hands shaking and your eyes red?" Alana stared down at the ruined cornbread. "He's engaged to someone perfect." "Perfect's a funny word," Della said, wheeling herself closer. "Your granddaddy had a temper, and a lazy streak a mile wide, but he loved me until his last breath. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing." Alana swallowed. He chose her. "But he called you." That stopped her. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Sure you do. You don't like your options." Alana sat down at the kitchen table. "If I say yes, I'm the girl who ruins a wedding. If I say no, I return to pretending I never loved him." "Sometimes," Della said gently, "we hurt either way. The question is which pain we can live with." That night, Alana sat on her bed with the window open, the ocean wind whispering through the curtains. The box of letters sat on her lap. She pulled out a blank page. "Dear Ethan, today, you opened a door, and I saw the man I once loved standing on the other side. I thought I'd moved on. I thought I'd buried all of that. But now I wonder if love ever really dies, or if it just learns how to wait quietly until someone repeats your name." She didn't sign it. She didn't even fold it. She just let the paper sit in the moonlight, a fragile truth laid bare in ink. Below her, the city of Charleston sighed in its sleep, unaware that in a tiny apartment above a shop full of old treasures, a woman was beginning to remember what it felt like to want something deeply, and fear it just as much. Alana stood at the kitchen sink the next morning, watching the first streaks of sunlight stretch across the dew-glazed garden. She sipped lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, her thoughts far from the toast growing cold on her plate. The letter she had written the night before sat on the counter, unsigned but unforgotten. It hadn't been a letter to send. None of them were. It had been a release, a way to contain the swirl of emotion Ethan had stirred by reappearing in her life with a glance and word. Friends. The word haunted her still. She tried to distract herself with work. She reviewed the day's orders for Brooks' table, packed a few containers for an early delivery, and answered emails while the sun rose higher. Her grandmother had already been wheeled out to the porch by the home nurse and was pruning mint leaves with all the precision of a master gardener. But even with her hands busy, her mind kept returning to the message Ethan had sent the day before. "Can we talk? In person, please." She hadn't replied, and she shouldn't. Not when the man was 12 days away from marrying someone else. Her phone buzzed again. At first, she ignored it, but when it buzzed a second time, then a third, she snatched it up and glanced at the screen. Unknown caller. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the decline button. Then, for reasons she couldn't explain, maybe curiosity, maybe weakness, she answered. "Hello?" A long silence followed, then his voice. "Alana, it's Ethan." The sound of his name in his voice sent a tremor through her chest. She gripped the edge of the counter, grounding herself. "I figured," she said carefully. "I hope I'm not crossing a line. I didn't want to leave things like that." "There is no thing, Ethan. You're getting married." He sighed on the other end. She could almost picture him running his hand through his hair the way he used to when he was nervous. "I know how this looks," he said. "I know it's wild to call you out of nowhere, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since yesterday." Alana leaned her hip against the counter. "Ethan, it's been over a decade. You're engaged. You have a life. And yet, seeing you at my door felt more real than anything else has in years." She didn't reply. He pressed on. "Do you remember senior year? That day behind the gym?" She closed her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I remember. I never forgot that. I've thought about it more times than I care to admit. You were crying, and I didn't know what to say, so I just sat with you. And that was enough," she said quietly, "more than anyone else did." Another beat of silence passed between them. A silence that wasn't awkward, just heavy. He said this is probably the worst timing in the history of timing. But, "Would you meet me for coffee? Just talk. Just once." She pressed her forehead to the cool window pane, trying to calm the storm swirling in her chest. "Why?" she asked. "So you can have closure before your wedding?" "No," he said firmly. "So I can say the things I should have said 17 years ago." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. "That's not a good idea," she said. "Please. One word. So soft, so wrecked." She turned away from the window, her eyes falling on the stack of letters across the counter. There were so many reasons to say no. But the most dangerous part of her, the part that still remembered the sound of his laugh and the kindness in his gaze, whispered yes. "Where?" she asked, already regretting the question. "The Coffee Bean. Queen Street. Tomorrow at 10? "Fine," she said quickly, before she could change her mind. "But 1 hour. That's it. I'll be there." She hung up before he could say anything else, then dropped the phone onto the counter like it had burned her. Her legs suddenly felt weak, and she sank onto the couch, heart hammering. Behind her, the screen door creaked open, and Miss Della wheeled herself in with the nurse's help, her gaze sharper than usual. "You're going," she said. Alana looked at her, startled. What? To see him? I could hear the whole thing through the window. You're going. Alana exhaled, covering her face with her hands. I shouldn't. Maybe not, her grandmother said. But you will. I don't want to be that girl. What girl? The girl who ruins someone else's life just because hers didn't go the way she planned. Della wheeled closer, her voice quiet but firm. Baby, you didn't ask him to call you. You didn't go knocking on his door. That boy made his choice the moment he sent that message, whether you will listen to your guilt or your heart. Alana shook her head. What if I say yes and it goes wrong? What if I let myself hope and it hurts worse than before? Miss Della looked at her for a long time before answering. Then at least you'll know. And knowing is always better than spending the rest of your life wondering what might have been. That night, Alana couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the distant hum of the harbor, the occasional bark of a dog, and the creak of old wood settling. The moonlight painted silver patterns on the ceiling. On her nightstand sat the letter she'd written the night before. She picked it up and reread it, this time not with sadness, but with a strange calm. Then she opened a fresh page. Dear Ethan, you asked me to meet you, and I said yes. But I need you to understand something before I see you again. This isn't high school. I'm not the girl who used to dream about you walking me home. I've built a life. It may not look like much to people like you, your fiancé, or your mother. But it's mine. And I won't risk breaking it for anything less than the truth. She folded the letter, not to mail it, but to remind herself who she was now. A woman who had once loved in silence. A woman who was about to face the boy who had unknowingly held her heart for 17 years. Not for fantasy, not for nostalgia, but for closure or a new beginning. She didn't know which. Only that the next day, at 10 o'clock, everything might change. The coffee bean on Queen Street buzzed with the usual morning rhythm. Tourists huddled over guidebooks. Locals ordered lattes with practiced speed. And jazz floated softly from the overhead speakers. Charleston sunlight spilled through tall windows, illuminating shelves of pastries and copper light fixtures above the counter. Alana arrived 15 minutes early. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. Nothing fancy, but nothing frayed. A soft green dress that hugged her curves modestly, and a gold locket that had belonged to her mother. Her hair was twisted into a bun, neat but not rigid. She wore just enough makeup to feel like she wasn't hiding, but not so much that it felt like armor. She slid into a corner table, with her back to the wall, her eyes trained on the door. Old instincts from an unpredictable childhood taught her always to know the exits and constantly prepare for disappointment. The coffee in her cup had cooled by the time she saw him. Ethan entered the cafe at exactly 10 o'clock, dressed in a crisp button-down rolled at the sleeves and dark jeans. He looked the same, yet different. Older around the eyes, broader in the shoulders, his movements more deliberate. But when his eyes found hers, his smile held the same boyish uncertainty she remembered from study groups and hallway glances. Hey, he said, sliding into the chair across from her. Hey, she echoed, wrapping her hands around the coffee cup. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't either. He chuckled softly, then looked down at his hands, which fidgeted with his shirt sleeve. How's your grandmother? Alana blinked. You remember Miss Della? Of course. She used to give me cookies after school. Said I needed fattening up. A reluctant smile tugged at Alana's lips. She remembers you too. Asked yesterday if you still snore. That made him laugh, a full, unguarded sound that made something inside her flutter. I probably do, he admitted. You look good, Alana. You always did. Careful, she said. That almost sounds like flirting. He sobered. It's not. It's just honest. A silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just filled. She cleared her throat. So, why did you call? He looked out the window, then back at her. Because I couldn't stop thinking about you after yesterday. Seeing you again. It knocked something loose. She nodded slowly. Funny how memory works. I've been trying to forget you for years. Don't, he said quickly. I never forgot you. Her gaze narrowed. Then why didn't you say anything? All those years. We had time. I was scared. Of what? Of you, he said, surprising her. Of how you made me feel. Of not being enough. You were always so grounded, so self-aware. I was just a kid trying to be what everyone expected. I didn't think I deserved you. Alana stared at him. You didn't think you deserved me, she repeated slowly. So instead of finding out, you stayed quiet and moved on to someone safe. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, but you did. The words hung between them like smoke. I know, he said. I'm not asking for anything. I needed to tell you the truth. I was falling in love with you back then, and I never told you. Alana's breath caught in her throat. You were what? Falling in love, he said again, more firmly this time. You were the one person I felt completely myself with. You saw through everything, grades, trophies, the pressure. You just saw me. And I was too much of a coward to do anything about it. She looked away, blinking hard. You don't get to say that now, Ethan, she said quietly. Not when you're engaged. Not when you're 12 days away from promising forever to someone else. I know, he said. I know the timing is horrible. But if I had gone through the wedding without saying this, without telling you, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. Alana's voice dropped to a whisper. And what exactly do you expect from me? I'll wait in the wings while you figure out whether you're ready to blow up your perfect life? No, he said. That's not what I want. Then what do you want? She snapped, louder than intended. A few heads turned from nearby tables. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. I want to know if you ever felt the same, if I weren't alone in it. Alana's chest tightened. She had dreamed of this moment, in high school, in college, on lonely nights, the fantasy where he realized he'd loved her all along. But now that it was real, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a test. I wrote letters, she said, eyes locked on his, dozens of them. I kept them hidden under my bed. I loved you so much it scared me. He flinched like the truth had struck him across the face. And I said nothing, he whispered. You said friends. Yesterday, you looked at me and called us friends. Because I panicked. Alana shook her head. Because I was a memory you didn't plan on confronting. He reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. You're not a memory. You're here. And seeing you again woke up something in me I didn't realize had fallen asleep. Her heart pounded, but she didn't pull away. She stared at their hands, his pale and warm, hers darker and calloused from kitchen work. You're marrying someone else, Ethan. He was silent for a long moment. Then, not if I still love someone who isn't her. Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not here. Not now. You have no idea what you're doing, she whispered. To her. To me. To yourself. I do, he said softly. For the first time, I do. She pulled her hand away gently, This is wild. Maybe, he said. But crazy is sometimes just another word, honestly. Alana stood up slowly. Her coffee sat untouched. I need time. I understand. She turned to leave, her fingers trembling as she grabbed her purse. Then she stopped, her back to him. Tomorrow, everything could be different. So think carefully, Ethan. Because once you choose, there's no going back. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was already loud enough. The bell above the antique shop chimed with its usual cheerful jingle, but the sound was too sharp, too deliberate, for a casual customer. Alana looked up from the register, startled. She hadn't been expecting anyone. Most of her regulars came early or late, avoiding the mid-afternoon sun. Her catering orders had been finished that morning. The shop had been tranquil all day, and she'd welcomed the silence. Until now. The woman who stepped inside wore elegance like armor. Harper Langston's heels clicked against the weathered floorboards with each precise step. Her hair, a sleek waterfall of blonde waves, was perfectly styled, despite the coastal humidity. Her makeup was immaculate. But her eyes, those crystal blue eyes Alana hadn't forgotten, were swollen and red. Alana's breath caught. She stood still behind the counter, one hand braced on the mahogany edge. Miss Brooks, Harper said calmly. Too calmly. Alana tried to soften her voice. I'm sorry, but we're closing early today. I'm not here to browse. Harper's smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm here to talk. Alana looked at the door, then at the woman walking toward her like a silk-covered storm. This probably isn't a good idea. No, Harper said, stopping just in front of the counter. But here we are. For a moment, they stared at each other. Two women, impossibly different, yet tethered by the same man and a decision that hadn't fully landed yet. Alana took a steadying breath. How did you know where to find me? I followed the delivery receipt from your catering invoice, Harper said, unclasping a small purse and pulling out a folded slip of paper. Not difficult. I have resources. Of course she did. Alana crossed her arms and forced herself to stay calm. And what do you want, Harper? The other woman's voice cracked, revealing the vulnerability beneath the composure. I want to understand. Understand what? How one conversation can unravel 2 years of a relationship. Alana hesitated. That wasn't my intention. But it was the result. Silence. I didn't reach out to him, Alana said gently. I didn't ask him to call me. I didn't know he lived in Charleston until I showed up at his door with lunch. Harper's eyes narrowed slightly. How poetic. It was a coincidence. Harper stepped back and glanced around the room. The antique shelves, the heirloom jewelry, the faded light pouring through stained glass. This place suits you, she murmured. Sentimental, a little fragile, full of stories. Alana straightened. Why are you here? Harper finally dropped the mask. I loved him, she said, her voice cracking on the word. Maybe I still do, but yesterday, he looked at me like a stranger. And I've been trying to figure out how someone I thought I knew could look at someone else like they were home. Alana's throat tightened. Harper. I gave him everything, Harper continued, stepping closer. I introduced him to my world, opened doors he couldn't have walked through alone, and shaped him into someone who could sit beside senators and CEOs. And now he wants to throw it all away. For what? She paused. For nostalgia? For someone he used to know in high school? Alana's temper flared. You don't know me. No, I don't, Harper admitted. But he does. And that terrifies me more than anything. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Harper asked quietly, Do you love him? Alana stared at her. Yes. The word was soft, unapologetic, honest. Harper blinked hard, nodding. So what now? I don't know, Alana replied, her voice raw. He hasn't made a decision. He says he loves me, but that's not the same thing as walking away from you. Harper's shoulders rose with a shaky breath. You could tell him to go back, that this was a mistake, that you don't want to be the reason he tears everything apart. I could, Alana whispered. And if I thought it would make either of you happy, I would. But I've spent most of my life believing I wasn't allowed to want more than survival, she said quietly. I've watched people I love give everything to relationships that drain them. My mother, my friends, me. And this, whatever this is with Ethan, it feels different. Like I finally get to want something that's mine. Tears slid down Harper's cheeks. She wiped them away angrily. You're not the villain, Alana, she said, and I'm not either. But one of us is going to be the collateral damage. Alana swallowed hard. I know. Harper reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. What's this? The receipt for the dress. Custom, non-refundable. Please let me know what it costs. Alana looked at the paper in silence, then back up at Harper. I didn't ask him to choose me. No, Harper said, her voice hollow. But you hoped he would. Alana didn't deny it. I hope, she said quietly, that no matter what happens, you find someone who chooses you first. Harper flinched. Then she turned and walked out without another word, the bell above the door giving one last chime that echoed through the shop like a final note in a broken symphony. Alana didn't move for a long time. She stood behind the counter, staring at the empty doorway, Harper's words ricocheting inside her skull. Maybe I still do. Like they were home. Do you love him? Yes. She hadn't meant to say it aloud, but she had. And now it was real. When she finally closed the shop for the night, she climbed the stairs to her apartment in a daze. The air smelled of lavender and lemon polish. Miss Della was asleep, the television murmuring soft gospel melodies in the next room. Alana sat at the desk and opened her journal. She didn't write another letter. She just sat there, her pen hovering above the paper. Somewhere across town, Ethan Whitmore was making a decision, and whichever way it landed, hearts would break. The sun had dipped below the horizon when Alana stepped onto the back porch. The air smelled of salt and honeysuckle, and the sky was a smear of deep violet and tangerine. Fireflies blinked lazily near the hydrangeas, and the crickets had begun their evening chorus. Miss Della sat wrapped in a quilt, her wheelchair angled toward the harbor. A chipped teacup rested in her lap, though the tea had long gone cold. Alana lowered herself into the wicker chair beside her, drawing her knees to her chest like she used to do as a little girl when the world felt too big. She came to see me, Alana murmured. Miss Della didn't move. Figured she might. She asked me to walk away, told me to let him go. A long silence stretched between them. The moon rose slowly, casting silver ripples across the dark water. And what did you tell her? Miss Della asked eventually. I didn't, Alana said, because I don't know what I will do. The older woman sipped what remained of her tea, then set the cup aside. Her hands, weathered and strong, folded neatly in her lap. You think you're the first woman to face a choice like this? She asked gently. Your mama didn't stand where you're standing now. You think I didn't? Alana blinked, surprised. You? Miss Della let out a breath that sounded half like a sigh, half like a memory. Your granddaddy wasn't the first man I loved. Alana turned toward her fully. You've never told me that. Because some stories don't ask to be remembered. Della said, her voice soft. But tonight seems like a night for remembering. She stared out at the harbor for a long moment, the moonlight casting deep shadows in the hollows of her cheeks. His name was James Morrison. Jimmy, to his friends. We grew up 3 houses apart, shared bus rides, soda pops, and even a first kiss under the old magnolia tree on Mason Street. A wistful smile ghosted across her lips. When the war started, he enlisted the second he turned 18, promised to write and return. Della's voice turned quieter, and he did. But not before I met someone else. Your grandfather. Alana said nothing. She listened, her heart heavy with her grandmother's secrets. Robert Whitfield was calm, while Jimmy was wild. Della said he had steady hands and a quiet way of looking at me that made me feel safe. I didn't plan to fall for him, but sometimes love doesn't ask your permission. She paused and added that Jimmy came home 3 months before my wedding, showed up on my porch with a ring he'd bought in Paris, and stories about how thoughts of me kept him alive in the trenches. Alana's eyes welled. What did you do? I married Robert anyway, Della said simply because it felt like the right thing, the safe thing, the decent thing. She turned, finally meeting Alana's gaze. And I never stopped wondering. I never stopped asking myself if I had made the wrong choice. Alana whispered, Did you love Granddad? Fiercely. Completely. We had 43 good years before cancer took him. I would choose him again. Then why does it still sound like you regret it? Della looked away. Because regret isn't always about making the wrong choice. Sometimes, it's about wondering if a different choice could have brought a different kind of happiness. Alana wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. And your mother? She asked, hesitating. You said she faced something like this too? Della stiffened. Her hands tightened slightly in her lap. Your daddy was married when he met Rebecca. Alana froze. She knew? She asked, stunned. Mama knew he was married? She knew, Della said, her voice low and pained. But she loved him anyway, believed all his promises, thought he'd leave that other life and start one with her. He didn't. Alana's breath hitched. So when she got pregnant with me, he disappeared, Della finished, went back to Atlanta, and never came around again. Alana stood and walked to the porch railing, staring at the water. The pieces of her history fell into place like broken glass and finally arranged to show the whole picture. Della quietly said she spent the rest of her life believing she was being punished. Loving someone she couldn't have was the reason everything fell apart. Alana gripped the wooden rail. You should have told me. I should have, Della agreed. But I was trying to protect you. Alana turned back toward her. And now? Della said, her eyes shining. I'm trying to prepare you. She wheeled herself closer, reached up, and took Alana's hand. Don't repeat our mistakes. Don't choose silence and safety if your heart is screaming for something else. But don't chase dreams that don't chase you back either. Alana knelt beside her grandmother's chair, resting her head gently against her shoulder. I'm so scared, Nana. I know, baby. If I say yes to him, and he walks away again, you won't shatter, Della said firmly. You'll hurt, but you won't break. You've lived too much, lost too much, and built too much to be destroyed by a man's indecision. Alana closed her eyes. A breeze rustled the leaves in the garden, and waves lapping at the dock mingled with the hum of summer night. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. A message from Ethan. It's done. I told her everything. Can we meet tomorrow? I need to see you. Her breath caught. She handed the phone to her grandmother, who read the message with calm eyes. "Time to decide," Della said, handing it back. "Time to figure out whether you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what if, or finally find out what is." Alana stared down at the glowing screen. Then she typed 3 words: where and when. The Magnolia Plantation Gardens stretched wide beneath a soft afternoon sun, their ancient oaks dripping with Spanish moss like cathedral veils. Golden light filtered through the canopy, casting long shadows across the gravel paths and rippling ponds. Butterflies flitted over flowering bushes, and dragonflies danced above the slow-moving river nearby. It was Alana's idea to meet here. Not a cafe, not a restaurant. Somewhere private, open, and honest. They could speak without the burden of walls or onlookers. She spotted Ethan before he saw her. He sat alone on a weathered bench overlooking the Ashley River, his elbows on his knees, his gaze locked on the current, as if it held the answers to questions he was still afraid to ask. He looked disheveled. Not in a careless way, but in the way of someone who hadn't slept well. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair slightly unkempt, and the dark shadows beneath his eyes told stories of restless nights and emotional weight. When she stepped onto the path, his head turned. He stood quickly, his expression unreadable, somewhere between relief and fear. "Thank you for coming," he said. Alana gave a slight nod and strolled toward the bench, sitting on the opposite end, leaving space between them like a respectful buffer. "You said it's done," she said. He exhaled. "Yes, I told Harper everything." She stared straight ahead. How did she take it? She was angry, devastated, but mostly quiet. Like she already knew before I even said the words. Alana nodded slowly. "She came to see me." Ethan's head snapped toward her. "She what?" She wanted to understand why. Why would you risk everything? His shoulders sagged with guilt. "I never meant for her to be hurt like this," Alana said quietly, "that you didn't mean to fall out of love with her. But here we are." They sat silently, letting the river speak in ripples and hushes. "She asked me to walk away," Alana added. He turned to her again. "And what did you say?" "I didn't know if I could." Ethan looked down at his hands. "I wouldn't blame you if you did." Alana sighed, finally turning to face him. "Ethan, I need you to understand something before this goes any further." "Okay, this won't be easy," she said. "Whatever this becomes, if it becomes anything, it won't be simple. I don't live in your world. I don't come from money. I don't host art galas or know which fork to use at 5-course dinners. I don't care about any of that. You should," she said gently, "because your world does. Your mother, friends, and business partners. They'll all see me as the woman who broke up your engagement and doesn't belong. They don't get to decide who belongs in my life. But they'll try," she said. "And it'll wear you down if you're not ready." Ethan leaned toward her, his voice steady. "You think I haven't thought about all that? I have. Over and over again. But when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years." Alana shook her head, her eyes brimming with emotion. "This isn't a fantasy, Ethan. It's real life. Real pain. Real consequences. I know that." "Do you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because I've built my life from the ground up. I run a business that's still crawling toward success. I take care of my grandmother full-time. I live in a 2-room apartment above an antique shop. I can't give you fancy parties or public prestige. I'm not asking for any of that," he said firmly. "But what if you miss it?" she whispered. "What if 6 months from now you regret this? What if the weight of what you gave up starts to crush us? He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Do you remember the day my dad died? Right before Christmas break, senior year?" She nodded. "Of course." I walked into calculus and couldn't hear a word anyone said. It was like everything had gone underwater. People offered hugs and condolences, but I felt numb, completely alone. He looked down at his hands again. "You found me after school, behind the gym. I was sitting in the rain, soaked to the bone. You didn't try to fix it. You didn't say anything profound. You just sat next to me while I cried." Alana felt tears threaten, but didn't look away. "That day," he said, "was the first time I understood what love could look like. Not flowers or fireworks. Just someone showing up when it's hardest. Someone seeing you at your worst and not walking away." He turned toward her now, eyes shining. "I didn't choose you because you're easy. I chose you because you've been home to me since I was 17. I was just too scared to admit it." Alana wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers. "You left a life people would kill for." "I left a life that didn't feel like mine," he replied. "You reminded me of who I used to be, and who I still want to be." They sat in stillness again, the late sun casting gold across the riverbank, the air thick with everything unspoken. Finally, he reached for her hand, gently, giving her the choice. She didn't pull away. Instead, she laced her fingers through his and whispered, "This still scares me." "I know," he said. "It scares me too. But maybe being scared is part of the point." A breeze stirred the moss overhead, and church bells began to chime the hour somewhere beyond the garden. "I don't want perfect," Alana said. "I wish to tell the truth." Ethan smiled softly. "Then let's build something true, one day at a time." Charleston's Preservation Society Gala was not where Alana expected to find herself. The invitation had come 2 weeks after that afternoon at Magnolia Gardens. Ethan had asked her to attend with a quiet seriousness that hinted at something more profound than a simple date. "It's important," he'd said. "Not just for the optics, for me. I want people to see us together, officially." She had said yes, but now, standing in the mirror of the dressing room at a local boutique where Harper's tailor had once worked, she regretted it. The black cocktail dress Ethan insisted on buying for her fit like it had been sewn for her alone. Elegant but understated. Classy without pretense. Her curls framed her face in soft waves, and the pearl studs Miss Della had worn at her wedding anchored her look with quiet grace. Still, as she reapplied her lipstick with trembling fingers, Alana couldn't ignore the voice inside her whispering, "You don't belong here." The event was held at an exclusive country club between rows of ancient oak trees and sprawling gardens. It was a place of crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and people who used family names like currency. When she stepped through the grand entrance on Ethan's arm, conversation dipped for a moment. Just a fraction of a second. A pause in the music of mingled voices and champagne laughter, but enough to feel like a spotlight had landed on her chest. "Breathe," Ethan whispered, gently pressing his hand to her back. "I am," she lied. The crowd was full of power brokers, legacy families, and board members with art collections and summer homes. Alana kept her chin high, her shoulders straight, but inside, her nerves fluttered like birds trapped beneath glass. Ethan guided her to a small group of his colleagues, making introductions with confidence and ease. "This is Alana Brooks," he said proudly. "She owns one of the best catering businesses in Charleston." That surprised a few of them. The eyebrows raised were subtle, but not invisible. The compliments came too quickly, too polished. The kind that sounded polite, but not genuine. One woman, a silver-haired doyenne, in a sapphire gown, smiled too tightly and asked, "And how long have you two been working together?" Ethan didn't miss a beat. "We're dating." Alana smiled, soft but deliberate. "We've known each other since high school. Life just took a little time to catch up." Some laughed. Some didn't. As the evening wore on, she kept up the performance. She laughed at dry jokes, nodded through conversations about tax codes and property values, and fielded comments that sounded more like tests than small talk. Ethan stayed close, attentive, protective, without being possessive. Every time their fingers brushed, she remembered why she was here and for whom she was doing this. Still, it wasn't enough to keep the doubt from creeping in. The music shifted as the quartet transitioned into a waltz. Alana made her way to the powder room, needing a moment to breathe without judgment pressing against her spine. The bathroom was empty when she entered. Floor-to-ceiling marble, soft lighting, and mirrors too honest for comfort. She stood at the sink, gripping the counter's edge, trying to slow her racing heart. Then the door opened, and Patricia Whitmore walked in, Ethan's mother. Tall, poised, and wrapped in a pale gray silk gown, she looked every bit the portrait of Southern dignity. Her hair was pinned perfectly, her pearls flawless. Her eyes found Alana's in the mirror. "Miss Brooks," she said with calm civility. Alana turned slowly. "Mrs. Whitmore, I would like to have a moment to speak privately." Alana nodded once. "Of course." Patricia approached the sink beside her, dabbing at her lipstick with a linen napkin. Her movements were precise, practiced. Her silence was louder than most people's speeches. "You're aware," she said at last, "that this evening was meant to celebrate the future Ethan was building with Harper." Alana didn't flinch. "The future has changed." "Did it?" Patricia glanced at her. Or was it simply delayed? Alana's jaw tightened. He made his decision. "People make impulsive decisions all the time," Patricia said calmly. "Especially when faced with nostalgia, with guilt, with the illusion of unfinished business." Alana turned to face her fully. "Is that what you think I am? Unfinished business?" Patricia said evenly, "that you are an intelligent, capable woman who has captured my son's attention during a vulnerable time in his life. And you're wise enough to know how fragile that attachment can be." The implication was clear. "I'm not a phase," Alana said. "No," Patricia admitted, "but you are a disruption. And in certain circles, disruption isn't welcome." Alana took a breath, willing her voice to remain calm. "With all due respect, Mrs. Whitmore, I didn't come here tonight to be welcomed. I came because the man your son is now, not the man you raised, asked me to stand beside him." Patricia's expression didn't change, but her gaze sharpened. "And how long do you think that version of him will last, Miss Brooks?" The question hit its mark. For a moment, doubt whispered louder than resolve. But then Alana remembered the garden, the bench, his hand in hers. How he looked at her was not a choice, but a certainty. "We'll find out," she said softly. She stepped past Patricia and exited the powder room with her head high, her heart pounding. As she re-entered the ballroom, Ethan spotted her instantly and crossed the floor without hesitation. He threaded his fingers through hers and gave her a questioning look. "You okay?" Alana forced a smile, not fake, but not whole either. "Let's say the lions are still hungry." Ethan's expression darkened slightly, but he didn't press. They returned to the dance floor, and when he pulled her close, the noise of the gala faded around her. His arms were warm. His chest was steady. And for a moment, she let herself believe that love could be louder than legacy. The drive home was quiet. Charleston streets were slick with recent rain, the city lights reflecting in shimmering puddles like fractured stars. The engine's hum and the soft rustle of tires on wet asphalt filled the space between Alana and Ethan, neither ready to break the fragile silence. Alana stared out the window, watching as familiar landmarks drifted past. Old City Market, the waterfront docks, the low brick buildings on King Street, glowing in golden light. Ethan's hand rested lightly on hers. "I'm sorry," he said at last, voice low and rough with fatigue. "For what?" she asked. "For dragging you into a world you didn't ask for." Alana turned to him, searching his eyes. "I chose to come. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But knowing doesn't make it easier," he replied. "My mother, she doesn't see me anymore. She sees a son who's made a reckless choice." "She's scared," Alana said softly. "Because she loves you. The world she's built depends on the man she thought you'd become." Ethan nodded. "And I'm not sure I'm ready to be the man she needs, or the man she expects." Alana squeezed his hand. "You don't have to be either. You have to be yourself." A tired smile flickered across his face. "I want to believe that's enough." They reached Alana's apartment, and she turned off the engine reluctantly. "I'll walk you to your door," Ethan offered. She nodded. As they stepped inside, the familiar scent of cinnamon and old wood wrapped around her like a balm. Miss Della was in her chair by the window, reading a battered book by the lamp's soft glow. "Back already?" she said, eyes twinkling. Alana smiled tiredly. "It was a night." Della nodded knowingly. "Did he protect you?" Alana hesitated, then said, "He did." The room settled into calm. Outside, the night was alive with the chirping of cicadas and the occasional bark of a distant dog. Alana looked at Ethan, who had taken a seat in the corner, his gaze distant. "We'll have to face Patricia again," he said quietly. "And Harper," Alana added. "Both formidable," Ethan agreed with a half laugh. "But we have something they don't," Alana said, her voice stronger than she felt. "The truth. And time." Ethan met her eyes. Time. The following days passed in a dizzy blur. Alana juggled catering orders, cared for her grandmother, and tried navigating the new complexity of seeing Ethan in her everyday world and the social circles that once felt so foreign. Each meeting with Ethan was a reminder that love was not a fairy tale, but a series of choices, sometimes messy, sometimes painful, but always real. They faced questions from friends, whispered comments from acquaintances, and the cold shoulders of those loyal to old alliances. Yet, in the quiet moments, over late-night takeout, poetry shared in the kitchen, and stolen glances across crowded rooms, they built a foundation stronger than gossip or expectation. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the window, Ethan pulled Alana close. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. He shook his head. "Never. Not for a second." Alana smiled, resting her head against his chest. "Me neither." But the peace was fragile. One afternoon, Alana's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" "Alana, it's Harper." The voice was steady, measured. "I wanted to talk." They met at a quiet cafe away from prying eyes. Harper's eyes were tired but resolute. "I'm starting my own event planning business," she said. "Something to build for me, not just for someone else." Alana nodded slowly. "That's brave." Harper smiled faintly. "I realized holding on to anger was only hurting me. And neither of us is a villain." They talked for hours about love, loss, forgiveness, and women's complicated paths to pursue happiness. Something unspoken passed between them when they parted. A fragile truce forged in shared understanding. Alana sat with Miss Della at the antique shop, reflecting on how far she'd come. "Are you happy?" her grandmother asked gently. Alana thought for a moment. "Yes," she said finally. "In a way I never imagined." Della smiled. "Good. Because happiness is not found in perfect lives, but in imperfect love." Alana reached out, squeezing her grandmother's hand. "I'm ready," she said, "to build a new life, one day at a time." Outside, the Charleston sun climbed higher, painting the city in warm gold. And somewhere deep in her heart, Alana knew that this was just the beginning. The morning light spilled gently through the lace curtains of the small house Ethan had bought in the Elliott neighborhood, casting delicate patterns on the hardwood floor. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of cinnamon rolls cooling on the counter, a smell quickly becoming a morning ritual. Alana stood at the kitchen island, kneading dough with the same steady rhythm her grandmother had taught her years ago. The flour dusted her apron and fingers, but she didn't mind. It felt grounding, real. A quiet comfort amid the whirlwind of change. Ethan returned from his morning run, still damp with sweat, his tousled hair evidence of a workout well done. He hung his running shoes by the door with a soft clatter and stepped into the kitchen. "Smells incredible," he said, his voice warm, wrapping around her like a familiar song. Alana smiled, sliding a cinnamon roll onto a plate. "Your mom's recipe." He approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. Together, they looked out the window toward the converted garage that had been renovated to give Miss Della her small apartment, a space of independence while keeping her close for daily care. "Dow's Nana this morning?" Ethan asked gently. She was already out in the garden, bossing around the tomatoes. Alana laughed softly. Ethan's smile deepened. "She's stubborn. Wonder where you get it from." Alana turned in his arms, her eyes sparkling. "Speaking of stubborn," she pulled her phone from her pocket. "I got a call from the food magazine yesterday. They want to feature the catering business in their holiday issue." Ethan's eyes lit up. "That's amazing. I'm proud of you." They stood in quiet celebration, which comes not from grand gestures, but from shared moments of small victories. Their life together was far from perfect. It was messy and unpredictable, filled with early mornings, late nights, and the balancing act of two careers, family obligations, and the ever-present echoes of their pasts. But it was theirs. The following weeks brought new challenges. Patricia Whitmore's disapproval lingered like a shadow, and Harper's rare visits were tinged with an awkward civility neither woman fully understood. One afternoon, Victoria Ashworth stepped out of her pristine white BMW and approached the house with a composed expression, softened only slightly by the late summer sun. Her visits had become less frequent, but no less charged with unspoken history. Alana watched from the porch swing as Ethan greeted Victoria at the door. The tension was palpable, a blend of respect, regret, and the fragile attempt at peace. Victoria carried a wrapped package, her eyes meeting Alana's with a complex mixture of vulnerability and resolve. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Victoria said softly. Alana nodded politely. "Not at all." Inside, Victoria presented the package. When unwrapped, it revealed a leather-bound photo album, pages filled with candid shots of Ethan and Alana, laughing at a farmer's market, sharing quiet moments, the gradual transformation from hesitant lovers to committed partners. Victoria's voice trembled as she spoke. "I've been angry for months, at you and the whole situation. But seeing you together, I realize what you have is real. It's not the fairy tale I thought I wanted. but it's authentic. Ethan instinctively reached for Alana's hand, their fingers intertwining as if to anchor each other against the fragile past. Victoria sighed, a bittersweet smile touching her lips. I needed to stop punishing us all for following our hearts. After she left, the three sat on the front porch swing, the photo album open between them. A story told in moments captured and memories made. Do you ever regret it? Alana asked quietly. Ethan's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. I regret hurting Victoria. I regret the timing, the chaos, but I never regret choosing you. Alana leaned into him, her heart full. Neither do I. As the days stretched into months, their love matured beyond the intensity of first passion into something steady and profound, a partnership forged by honesty, sacrifice, and unwavering support. They celebrated quiet mornings and milestone achievements, knowing that love wasn't just about the grand declarations, but about choosing each other daily, despite flaws and fears. Alana's stack of unsent letters lay folded in a drawer, replaced by new letters, notes Ethan left on the kitchen counter, architectural sketches, annotated with inside jokes, grocery lists ending with, I love you. She understood now that some doors didn't just open once. They stayed open, inviting you to walk through them repeatedly, each passage revealing new rooms in the house of love they were building together. The church bells rang softly in the distance, marking the hour as sunlight bathed Charleston in shades of gold and promise. Alana looked at Ethan, her hand finding his, their fingers fitting together as perfectly as the life they had carved out. And in that moment, she knew what it meant to be chosen, not despite her imperfections, but because of them. Not as a consolation prize, but as the prize itself. When the door opened that day, it hadn't just revealed a man standing on the other side. It had revealed the possibility of becoming who she was always meant to be. Loved. Loving. Finally, home. The phone vibrated sharply on the kitchen table, shattering the quiet that had settled between Alana and Ethan like a fragile glass sculpture. Alana glanced at the screen. It was Victoria. Her heart stuttered. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen, then swiped to answer. Hello? Alana. Victoria's voice was steady but laced with exhaustion. I want to meet. Alana swallowed, steadying herself. When? Tonight. The cafe on King Street. 7 o'clock. The words hung in the air like a challenge and an olive branch wrapped in the same breath. The cafe was nearly empty when Alana arrived. The low conversation hum, the clinking of cups, and the scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air. Victoria sat at a corner table, a soft glow from the overhead lamp framing her face. She looked tired but determined. Alana slid into the seat opposite her, searching for the right words. Victoria began without preamble. I've been angry at you, Ethan, and myself for months. Alana nodded, silently inviting her to continue. I thought I had everything planned. A life, a wedding, a future. And then it all fell apart. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. But seeing you two together, I realized love isn't always about fitting into a perfect picture. Sometimes it's messy, complicated, real. Alana's throat tightened. I'm sorry for the pain this caused you. Victoria shook her head. You didn't cause it. Ethan's choices caused it. And in a strange way, so did I. By ignoring the signs, by pretending everything was perfect. They talked for hours about love, loss, forgiveness, and the bravery it takes to let go and move forward. When Victoria left that night, something shifted. Not a reconciliation, but a beginning of peace. Back home, Alana and Ethan sat on the porch swing, the night wrapping around them like a protective cloak. "I'm tired," Ethan admitted. "Tired of secrets, of pretending." "Me too," Alana said softly. "We have to be honest with each other and with ourselves." Alana reached out, taking his hand. "No more running. Together," he promised. Weeks passed, and the couple faced challenges head-on. The whispers, sideways glances, and doubts tested their resolve. But with every hurdle, they grew stronger. Their love was no longer whispered secret in shadows, but a light they chose to carry openly. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan led Alana to a small garden behind the old church where they had first spoken of dreams and fears. He dropped to one knee, holding a simple gold ring. "Alana," he said, voice steady and sure, "I choose you. Not because it's easy, but because you make me want to be better. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes." They embraced, surrounded by falling leaves and the promise of a future forged through courage and truth. As the seasons changed, they planned a wedding that honored their pasts and celebrated their love. A gathering of family, friends, and a community that had watched their journey. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was theirs. On the day of the ceremony, Alana stood at the altar, heart pounding with joy and the bittersweet knowledge of what had been lost and gained. Ethan took her hands, his eyes shining with love. They exchanged vows of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of choosing each other daily. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause, not just for the union of two people, but for the triumph of love over fear and doubt. Later, as they danced under the stars, Alana caught sight of Victoria in the crowd, a quiet smile and a nod that said more than words could. They had all found a kind of peace. At that moment, Alana knew that love could heal and build bridges where walls once stood, even when complicated. The sunlight poured through the tall windows of the small house on Elliott Street, painting the worn wooden floors in warm gold. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and cinnamon rolls lingered, a comforting reminder of quiet mornings and new beginnings. Alana stood in the kitchen, the soft hum of the city just beyond the open window, mingling with the gentle laughter echoing from the porch swing. Outside, Ethan's deep voice intertwined with her grandmother's cheerful scolding as Miss Della teased him for his lack of gardening skills. It was the kind of ordinary moment that felt extraordinary. The last months had been a journey through storms and sunlight, heartbreak and hope, doubt and daring. They had fought for their love, navigated the judgments of others, and wrestled with the shadows of their pasts. And now, here they were, together. Alana brushed a stray curl from her face. She looked around the kitchen, the mismatched furniture collected from estate sales, the faded photographs of family and friends, the small vases of wildflowers on the windowsill. Each piece told a story of resilience and love, of finding beauty in imperfection. Her gaze settled on the stack of letters tucked away in the drawer. The unsent ones from years ago, silent witnesses to a love kept hidden. Next to them lay new letters, notes Ethan left on the counter, grocery lists ending with "I love you," sketches of architectural dreams annotated with playful doodles. She smiled, feeling the weight of all those unopened doors finally giving way. Ethan entered the kitchen, fresh from his morning run, hair damp and still tangled. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "Good morning, love," he murmured, kissing her temple. "Morning," she replied, resting her head against his chest. They stood like that momentarily, the quiet comfort of shared space and shared dreams surrounding them. "Do you ever wonder what might have been?" Alana asked, voice barely above a whisper. He considered her, fingers tracing lazy circles on her back. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember that what we have now is real, and that's worth every what if." She nodded, feeling gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. Later that day, they visited the Magnolia Plantation Gardens, where they had met again after years apart. The Spanish moss hung heavy in the afternoon light, casting dappled shadows over the paths. Hand in hand, they strolled, savoring the peaceful beauty of the place and the quiet certainty of their bond. At a weathered bench overlooking the river, they paused. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn book of poetry, the same collection they had shared as teenagers. He opened it to a page marked by a delicate pressed flower. "This," he said softly, "is where it all started. I first saw you not just as a friend, but as something more." Alana's eyes filled with tears. "And this," he continued, "is where we begin again." They sat together in the fading light, the river whispering ancient secrets nearby. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt wide open and full of possibility. Back home, Miss Della watched them from her porch, a knowing smile on her lips. "Love's never perfect," she said to herself, "but when it's true, it's home." Months passed, and their life settled into a new and familiar rhythm. Alana's catering business flourished, buoyed by local support and her unwavering dedication. Ethan's architectural firm landed major projects that challenged and inspired him. Their home became a sanctuary, filled with laughter, music, and the kind of love that grew stronger each day. They faced challenges, of course. Skepticism from some, the occasional whisper of doubt. But they met each one with honesty, patience, and a commitment to build a life on their terms. One evening, as they stood on their porch swing, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Ethan squeezed Alana's hand. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For choosing me, for loving me, for being brave enough to walk through that door." Alana smiled, leaning into him. "Thank you for waiting, and never give up." Together, they watched the stars begin to twinkle, the night sky promising endless possibilities. And in that moment, with hands clasped and hearts full, they knew they had found something rare and beautiful. A love that wasn't just about being chosen, but about picking each other every day for the rest of their lives.